Chapter 2.1 The Economic World. The Christians of the first century, like the Christians of today, had to earn their living in a workaday world. The propagation and practice of their faith was affected by prevailing economic conditions much as Christianity is affected today. Agriculture, industry, finance, transportation and travel all had a bearing upon the spread of the gospel. First we have agriculture. During the time of Christ and the early church, the Roman Empire occupied the land surrounding the Mediterranean basin. Judging by the ruins of towns that are still extant, the coastal territories were more fertile than they are today. North Africa, which is now semi-arid or else largely desert, contained immense farms on which cattle grazed or which grew fruits and vegetables. In Italy were large estates, which the owners rented out to tenant farmers and sharecroppers, where almost all kinds of fruits and grains could be grown. In the western provinces of Britain, Gaul, and Germany, agriculture flourished, and some of the farms were irrigated by government projects established by Augustus. Next we have industry. Manufacturing never was so important in ancient times as it is today, for machine tools were practically unknown, and goods had to be produced by human labor. In many cases the factories were private enterprises employing slaves. Small shops were the rule rather than the exception. Certain types of goods were produced in. Next is particular localities. Copper vessels were manufactured in Campania. Linens and paper came from Egypt. The best quality of earthenware originated in North Italy. Small wares, furniture, and household goods were generally produced locally, in the same way that similar commodities were supplied in the early American colonies by the skill and ingenuity of the town craftsmen such as the blacksmith and the carpenter. Probably every small village in the empire had its workmen who provided for the needs of their fellow townsmen. Luxury goods were imported. Gold, ivory, and rare woods came from Africa and from the East. Pearls and jewels were found in India. Furs came from Central Asia and Russia, and amber came from the far north. Caravans were cumbersome and were subject to attack by robbers. Although the empire had a large number of good roads, vehicular transportation was dependent upon animals for motive power, so that traffic was costly and slow. Shipping was carried on only by navigable rivers and on the ocean during the summer months. Mass production of cheap goods was practically impossible, for neither machinery nor transportation was available. Next is finance. The standard coins in the empire were the denarius and the gold aureus, or pound. 1 pound was worth 40 denarii. The denarius is mentioned several times in the New Testament, where it is variously translated, penny, or shilling. Its actual monetary value was about 17 cents of United States money, although its purchasing power was considerably greater. It was the ordinary day's wage for a laboring man in the East, Matt. 20-2. Many of the cities of the empire had the right to mint their own coinage, and the coins of the conquered nations were not retired from circulation, so that many various kinds of money were used concurrently within the realm. Money changers did a thriving business in dealing with travelers, as the episode of Jesus' cleansing of the temple showed. 21:12. Banking was generally practiced. Although there was not the intricate system of finance that is known to the modern world, the banks were not subsidized by the state, but consisted usually of private companies. Sometimes mercantile firms with foreign connections carried on negotiations for their customers. Borrowing, lending, discounting of notes, and foreign exchange were undertaken, and letters of credit were issued. Funds were often supplied to the banks by private individuals, whereas the bank acted only as agent. The normal rate of interest varied from 4 to 12%, though individual brokers often charged more. Brutus on one occasion paid as high as 48% on a loan. The parables of the talents, 25-15, and of the pounds, Luke 19:13, show that money lending was a common means of enlarging one's fortune. Next is transportation and travel. The rule of Rome over the provinces was greatly facilitated by its excellent system of roads, which, until the recent era of the automobile, were the best that the world had ever seen. The Romans built their roads as straight as possible, making cuts through hills and using viaducts to bridge valleys and streams. In building their highways they excavated the topsoil and filled the roadbed with 3 different layers of road material, crowning the center to throw off water, and then paving the top with stone. The roads were seldom more than 15 feet wide, but they were smooth and durable. Some of them are in use to the present day. Along these roads, which stretched in every direction from Rome to the frontiers, moved the armies and the caravans of commerce. The imperial post carried the government dispatches, whereas private businesses had their own couriers. Several of these roads were famous in antiquity. The Appian Way was the main line of communication between Rome and the south of Italy. It ran from Rome through Capua to Brundusium. From Brunsium a traveller could sail eastward to Dyrrhachium on the western side of Illyricum, from which the Egnatian highway crossed Illyricum and Macedonia to Thessalonica, and thence to Byzantium, now Istanbul. Another route led from Troas down to Ephesus on the western coast of Asia Minor, and then eastward through Laodicea and Colossus to Antioch of Pisidia, and thence southward through Iconium and Derbe to the pass of the Cilician Gates, through which it went on to Tarsus and to Syrian and Antioch. From Antioch roads led eastward to the Euphrates, where they tapped the trade routes to India. The Via Flaminia ran northward from Rome to Ariminum and thence to Mediolanum. From Mediolanum several roads branched out westward to Gaul, Germany, Rhaetia, and Noricum. The Via Claudia Augusta, begun in 15 BC and completed by Claudius, connected Verona with the Danube. Roads along the Danube connected Verona with Byzantium. To the west, the Via Aurelia ran from Rome to Genoa, from which the Via Domitia communicated with Massilia, Marseille. From Massilia the Via Augusta crossed the Pyrenees to Tarraco, and thence southward to the Sucro River, and through Corduba and Hispalis to Gades in Spain. In Gaul and in Britain there were numerous shorter roads that connected the chief towns with each other. The vehicles on these roads varied according to the wealth of their owners. Some people trudged the weary miles on foot, some rode on donkeys. The more well-to-do afforded horses or mules, and officials or magnates might travel in light carriages. Inns were located at convenient intervals, so that the travelers could stop for meals and shelter. Few of the inns were luxurious, and probably still fewer were really clean. Middle and upper-class travelers usually counted on the hospitality of their friends, so that they were not at the mercy of avaricious landlords and the conscienceless servants. Most of the commercial transportation was by water rather than by land. The Mediterranean Sea abounded in good ports which were busy all through the season for navigation. Alexandria was the chief port, since it was the outlet for the grain crop of Egypt. The Alexandrian merchant ships were the largest and finest of the day. Some of them were more than 200 feet in length. They were propelled by sails and carried enough oars so that the crew could maneuver the ship in an emergency. One of the largest ships of which there is any record carried 1,200 passengers in addition to its cargo. Most of the Alexandrian ships were engaged in the corn trade which supplied Rome with grain. Under Claudius, their upkeep was subsidized by the government in order to ensure a regular delivery of grain for the needs of the populace. Paul, at the time of his shipwreck, was aboard an Alexandrian ship, Acts 27-6, and after his rescue at Malta sailed for Italy in another, 28-11, named the Two Brothers. Warships were lighter and faster than merchantmen, and were generally propelled by oars pulled by galley slaves. Ships with 2, 3, and 5 banks of oars were not at all uncommon, while some had even 10 banks. Sails were sometimes used in cruising. In battle, where the outcome depended on the action of the ships, propulsion by hand became necessary for safe and accurate control. On the inland rivers and canals barges were used, chiefly for carrying cargoes of freight. Apparently they were not greatly patronized by passenger trade. No mention of such travel appears in the New Testament.